You're listening to Smart Bites, where big learning comes in small, digestible bites. Each episode, we break down fascinating topics from science and history to life skills and creativity into quick, fun lessons you can enjoy anytime, anywhere. So grab your headphones, open up your mind, and get ready to take a Smart Bite. There was a time when a cough could carry more weight than a sword. When a simple fever whispered louder than any warning bell. A time when people didn't just fear the night, they feared the morning. Because waking up meant counting who was still left. Now, I want you to picture this with me. You're sitting on your front porch. The sun is just beginning to rise. There's a road stretching out in front of you, the same road you've watched your whole life. And every morning, fewer and fewer people pass by. The baker doesn't open his shop. The neighbor's curtains stay closed. The church bells ring and ring and ring again. And somewhere, deep down, you start to realize this isn't just illness. This is something else. Something bigger. Something no one understands. No one can stop. Hey y'all, I'm Moonie, and this is Smart Bites, learning in small, digestible bites. And today, we're stepping into a story that changed the world forever. The Black Death. Now, history has a funny way of starting quietly. No grand announcement, no thunderclap, just movement. Trade routes stretching across continents, merchants carrying silks, spices, stories, and sometimes something they couldn't see. We believe that the Black Death began somewhere in Central Asia, traveling west along the Silk Road, one of the busiest trade networks of the medieval world. Now, imagine caravans moving slowly across deserts, ships rocking gently across dark waters, and tucked away in the corner of cargo holds were rats. And those rats carried fleas, and inside those fleas, a bacterium called Yersinia pestis. Now, nobody at the time knew any of this. They didn't see bacteria. They didn't understand transmission. All they saw was sickness. The sickness that was spreading like wildfire. And by 1347, ships began arriving in European ports. Places like Sicily, carrying crews that were already dying, or worse, already dead. Some accounts tell of ships drifting into the harbor with no one left alive to steer them, just silence and sickness waiting to step onto land. Now, let me tell you what made this disease so terrifying. It didn't creep in slowly, it struck fast. Someone might feel a little off one day, just tired, maybe a little feverish. But by the next, their bodies were already fighting a losing battle. High fever, violent chills, exhaustion so deep it felt like sinking. And then, those swollen lumps, buboes, painful, dark, and unmistakable. They appeared in the neck, under the arms, and in the groin. And once they showed up, most people didn't survive more than a few days. Now, I want you to sit with that for just a moment. There was no warning system, no hospital to rush to, and no treatment. Just hope, and then grief. Families would go to sleep together, and wake up already changed. Now, here's where it gets even more unsettling. The plague didn't just stay in one place. It moved, and it moved fast. Trade routes became highways for death, and cities became epicenters. And fear traveled even faster than the disease itself. And by the time people realized what was happening, it was already everywhere. Europe, the Middle East, parts of Asia, and the numbers, they're even harder to comprehend. The Black Death killed an estimated 25 million people in Europe alone, and tens of millions more across other regions. That's somewhere between 30 and 60% of the whole population. Let me say that again, plain and simple. Imagine half the people you know, half, gone. Not over years, over months. Villages disappeared. Farms went silent. And in some small towns, there were more graves than living souls. Now, here's where the story turns almost poetic. Because when people don't understand something, they tend to look up. In 1348, scholars at the University of Paris were asked to explain what was causing this devastation. And their answer? The sky. They pointed to a moment on March the 20th of 1345 when Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars aligned in what they called a triple conjunction. They believed this alignment corrupted the air, poisoned it, made it deadly to breathe. Now, I want you to imagine living in that world. No science, no microscopes, just stars shifting above you and people dying below you. So they reached for meaning, because humans have always needed answers, even when the answers aren't right. And if we're being honest, we still do that today. When life feels uncertain, when things don't seem to make sense, we look for something bigger to blame. Back then, it was the stars. Today, well, we just use different words. Now, here's the truth, plain and steady. The planets didn't cause the plague. It was Yersinia pestis. But that belief in the stars, it tells us something just as important. It tells us how deeply afraid people were. Now, let's lean into some of the stranger corners of this history, because this is where human behavior really shows itself. Let's talk a little bit about those plague doctors. You know, the ones that wore those long black robes and those bird-like masks that were super creepy, even on Halloween. They look almost theatrical today, but they were deadly serious. Doctors believed the disease spread through bad smells. They filled the mask with herbs and flowers, hoping to filter the air, but it didn't work. But it shows just how desperate people were to fight something. And then there's the poor cat tragedy. This one really hurts. People began killing cats, believing they were responsible. But guess what? Cats hunt rats. So with fewer cats, the rat population exploded. And the plague? It spread even faster. Sometimes the things we fear most lead us in exactly the wrong direction. Then you had the runners. People fled cities, packed what little they had, and ran. They were getting the heck out of Dodge. But they carried the disease with them. So the plague followed, spreading from town to town like a shadow that refused to be outrun. Now here's something folks don't always realize. The Black Death didn't just destroy society, it reshaped it. With so many workers gone, labor became valuable, wages increased, and the old feudal system began to crumble. The balance of power shifted, and out of devastation, a whole new world began slowly to form. Now, I want you to take a breath with me, just a quiet one. Imagine living in a world where you don't plan for the future because you're not sure there is one. Where every goodbye might be the last. Where silence starts to feel louder than sound. These weren't just numbers in a history book. They were people. People who laughed. People who loved. People who sat at tables just like yours. And in a matter of time, everything changed. So let's bring this story home, because history isn't just something we study, it's something we carry. Back then, they didn't understand disease. Today we do. Science didn't just explain the plague, it changed humanity's future. Fear alone, it led to blame, to confusion, to mistake. But fear, guided by truth, that's where wisdom begins. Even after unimaginable loss, people rebuilt. Communities formed again. Life continued. And that right there, that's the quiet strength of humanity. Now, think back to that porch we started on, that quiet road, that empty morning. The Black Death was a storm unlike any other. But even the fiercest of storms eventually pass. And what's left behind? It's something deeper than survival. It's understanding. It's resilience. It's the quiet realization that even in the darkest moments, life finds its way forward. So the next time you sit in quiet and the world feels uncertain, just remember, there were those who walked through far darker days and still found their way back to the light. Thank y'all for joining me today on Smart Bites, learning in small, digestible bites. Until next time, stay curious, keep learning, and be blessed.